DW Africa Link.
For years, the Sahel region has struggled against extremist groups, destabilized communities, and persistent threats to national security. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have each faced challenges containing the violence on their own. Now, they are placing their hopes in unity, combining military forces to confront this shared enemy. Will this new strategy succeed? We'll discuss it shortly. Stay tuned. I'm Ajuatin Krama Domina, and you're welcome to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that truly matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have announced a joint military force to tackle extremism. By pooling resources, these countries hope to reverse the tide against insurgent violence. Now, a joint force offers potential advantages, i.e. shared intelligence, unified operations, and a stronger regional presence. But this bold move comes at a critical moment for the region, as extremist attacks continue to displace thousands and undermine fragile governments. At stake is not only security, but also the future prosperity and stability of the Sahel. Cooperation could signal a new era of regional solidarity, but success will depend on overcoming mistrust, coordinating across diverse military cultures, and ensuring local community involvement. The international community will also be watching closely, as the outcome could reshape security strategies beyond West Africa. Yet, significant challenges remain. What will it take to transform this plan into an effective strategy? DW correspondent in the Sahel, Bram Posthumous, joins us. We also have a regional security analyst, Adib Sani. Good day, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
For having us.
Adib, I'll definitely want to begin with you. Was it surprising when you heard that the three Sahelian countries are coming together to form this joint military force?
Well, it hasn't been surprising primarily because of a number of reasons. First, those countries have literally been ostracized by the sub-regional body. There's been less or even no security cooperation in any way. There's less intelligence gathering. The security situation in those countries is worsening by the day, with attacks, audacious ones for that matter, staged by terrorist groups. Countries such as Mali is fighting on various fronts. I mean, it's fighting Al-Qaeda affiliated, ISIS-affiliated militant groups. It's fighting the Tuaregs who want their Republic of Azawad, and a whole lot of insecurity situation within that Sahel belt. So we saw it coming because at the point, of course, they would want to come together and form a security pact of some sort, share intelligence amongst themselves, aggregate their soldiers, and perhaps confront the terrorists.
You've essentially told us, even if not directly, the reasons why they are forming this alliance. But what does this mean? One, for the three countries, and two, for ECOWAS as well.
Well, there's been efforts, especially on the part of the new president of Ghana, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, in getting these countries back to ECOWAS, because ECOWAS cannot succeed if it is fragmented. We need these countries very much part of ECOWAS because they are fighting the terrorists directly. And so would need them to be part of any security framework that would succeed in countering the threat of terrorism. So the fact that they have formed their security pact means they are going on and succeeding with winning themselves off ECOWAS, which I must say is not such a pleasant news to the sub-regional body, and would further complicate any efforts in bringing them back to the body.
Bram, let me come to you. What has the reaction been in these three countries? Are people excited? Are they cautiously optimistic? Because we do know that there have been, similar initiatives like the G5 Sahel, for instance, with Chad and Mauritania, which really did not, work. What has been the reaction so far?
Well, first of all, thanks for mentioning the G5 Sahel, because obviously this is a stripped down version of that G5 Sahel with fewer complications, maybe, because the G5 Sahel was heavily pushed by France, which wanted it to replace its own anti-terrorist Operation Barkhane, which it was sick and tired of at the time. And it brought in complications because you had very, very different armies from different regional bodies with different command and control structures. So this on paper looks a bit easier. 3 Sahel states which have a lot in common, all 3 with relatively weak armies. We have to be honest about this. Niger is probably the one that has been able to maintain some kind of, resultant stability. Both the other armies do rely a lot on either volunteers, as is the case in Burkina Faso, and on Russia in the case of Mali, to defend itself, and it's not working. So they need special measures to see if they can take on this terrorist threat head on. Whether this is going to succeed, nobody can tell. As for the people inside these countries, you do know that expressing your opinion that doesn't tally with that of the junta is quite dangerous and risky. Can get you arrested, disappeared, and all the rest of it. So people are very, very guarded. What I do get consistently is distress calls from people who are in great financial difficulty, which is foremost in their minds, probably even more so than security. And they are desperately trying to survive a very, very, very difficult time that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are traversing. And the last thing, when it comes to security, people are voting with their feet. People have fled into Mauritania. People have fled across the border from Burkina into Mali. People have fled into Côte d'Ivoire in the north here. There is a couple of thousand. So that tells you a lot about what's going on in people's minds when it comes to them thinking about the security of their own lives, their own households, and their own well-being.
Adib, for you, Bram has said that it's early days yet to predict whether or not this will work. But for you, looking at the military strength they are hoping to put together, what does it look like? Is it going to work?
Well, I'm still wondering what the strategy is going to be, because all of those countries are contending with their internal security issues. Their armies have not been that good enough to confront the threats. In Burkina Faso, at a point, terrorists occupied over 50% of the area. At a point in Mali, the terrorists came knocking on Bamako. Niger attacks on daily basis, more like a daily ritual. So what I keep wondering is, are we bringing the soldiers together so they can go to Burkina Faso, deal with the situation, move to Mali, deal with the situation, and move to Niger, deal with the situation? I'm still trying to, make my mind around how exactly that is going to be done. All right. So I've always indicated that, look, these countries cannot do it alone. They cannot do it without ECOWAS. They cannot do it without the help of the international community. So this might just be a statement, but to what extent can we see it translate on the ground is another day's topic.
It does appear that they want to do it alone. And I mean, they have made several comments, including even, exiting from the ICC and forming their own criminal justice system and all of that. So it really does appear that they have the determination to join forces and do things on their own. Whether that will work or not is another conversation. But for you, what does a good security strategy look like for the fight against terrorism in this region?
So before I come to your question, let me mention that to a very large extent, this is coming from the expectation that Russia would step in and support. Russia is dealing with its own demons, in Ukraine. And so for any country to expect Russia to come in and fight for them might have to rethink, all right? So going forward, look, there's been a lot of interventions. We've had MINUSMA, Operation Barkhane, Takuba, the Joint Task Force, G5 Sahel, a whole lot of them are CRA initiatives. And nobody can confidently say that we have achieved so much as a result of all of this. Why? Because our strategy has been kinetic in nature, the use of military force, kill as many terrorists as possible, and local volunteers. So the militarized posture we've been fighting terrorism, I must say, from the work I have done within the sub-region, is not helping. It's only a fragment of the wider strategy that needs to be adopted. That would include the addressing the human insecurities. Young people who are without jobs, governments able to provide basic necessities of life to each people. It would interest you to know that there are a lot of ungoverned spaces. These terrorists fill the vacuum and are able to provide services that the government is not even able to provide. They are even able to provide justice.
Right. Bram, do you agree with what Adib has said? You take that for me, and then also take the political framing of this whole decision. What has the conversation been like?
Oh, I'm in total agreement with the previous speaker, absolutely. And you also need to add, the issue of the kind of military doctrine you are going to use to fight an asymmetrical war. You can set up a 5,000 strong joint force, but then you have to ask yourself the question, what kind of war are we actually fighting here? And this is very much a hit and run war with small units of terrorists being part of terrorist organizations that strike at will. And so what you need, I think, first and foremost, is human intelligence from on the ground, people willing and prepared to tell you what they see with their own eyes and hear with their own ears, and then inform the relevant authorities about the kind of movement that is taking place so that they can be more effectively combated. That's not happening. So because there is distrust, mutual, and that is a major problem. In terms of the political framing, you see kind of like the same process happening. It's more about pointing fingers than actually allocating responsibilities where they are. We've got military regimes in power that all of them promised within 6 months, 8 months, a year, we will rid you of this terrorist problem. They will have to admit to themselves, on our own and with the help of a little bit of help from Russia, we have not succeeded in achieving our objectives. You need to have an honest conversation with the people you're supposed to govern about what's going on. And people know a lot of things about what's happening in their own environment. But if they don't trust you as an authority to share that information, you will not be able to bring down the terrorist threat to a manageable level.
I'm happy you have mentioned something about see something, say something, because it's an initiative Ghana, for instance, piloted, to deal with terrorism threats. Adib, that did not work so much. Do you think it will work in the case of the Sahelian countries?
Well, if you follow my comments about that initiative, the very first time it was launched in Ghana, I've always stated that, look, if we don't get strategic with it, there's no way it's going to succeed. I said it was a good initiative and it's going to help a great deal because countering violent extremism is not just the preserve of only government or the men and women in uniform alone. Private citizens have a very important role to play in that regard. Unfortunately, they didn't listen to me and it failed woefully. As a matter of fact, at that same time, my center, the Jetske Center for Human Security and Peace Building, did a survey, on to just assess to what extent people know about countering terrorism and what their role is. And we asked them, how do you identify a terrorist? Believe it or not, we had a large segment of the respondents we engaged saying that they were looking out for people who had long beard. So that should tell you the extent of the lack of information or ignorance surrounding this topic of terrorism and what the people's role is. And when you go to a lot of even Western countries, just wear a jalbab, that long robe with a beard and a turban of some sort, and people would look at you and roll their eyes, So that is the extent of the lack of information, and the stereotypes that really is affecting efforts. But for these countries, I do hope that it succeeds, but they would have to get deliberate with it. There are a lot of issues, especially also in Burkina Faso. I remember at the point the government was handing over weapons without even training to civilians they called VVPs, volunteers, to fight terrorism. And trust me, these volunteers were engaging in acts that was even worse than the terrorists themselves.
I want to find out from the both of you. The fight against terrorism is a regional fight. If we have sort of a fragmented approach towards the fight, ECOWAS is doing its own thing, these Sahelian countries are also doing their own thing, will it affect the fight in any way? And any of you can take this question.
Well, of course. If we are fragmented, if we are divided, there's no way we can win the war. Because, like Brown said, one of the key ingredients is intelligence sharing. That is why some of us were very worried when, under the old administration of President Akufo-Addo, went to Washington and spoke about activities of Wagner, which incensed the Burkinabes, and we felt it would affect the friendship and the extent to which we share intelligence. So intelligence sharing is critical going forward. There's a need for us to have a strong standby force. At this point, anytime there's any insecurity situation in any part of the subcontinent, for example, recently in Benin, we have to count on the various countries to organize their, soldiers and dispatch them. But it usually is very bureaucratic. It takes a long time to get approved. A lot of the governments have their own economic issues at home, so the monies are not readily available. So going forward, we just don't need countries within West Africa to come together, but we need the support. And I'm saying this for the record, okay? There is no way we can succeed without Western support. They might not support directly, but there are so many indirect things they can do to support this fight against terrorism.
Right, Bram, let's hear you. Fragmentation in our fight against extremism, will it hurt or help Africa and the West African sub-region?
Well, it's like Adib said, it's very much a series of governments, some formal, some informal regional bodies, some in the process of being formed, all doing their own thing. And the issue with that is obviously that terrorism doesn't respect borders. We've seen that in, for instance, the attack in 2016 here in Grand Bassam in Côte d'Ivoire. We've seen that with other cross-border incursions, specifically into Benin, which were happening earlier this year. And so you need joint action. And indeed, you can probably not do this on your own. The problem with the international community is that, to my mind, no one in the international community has been really serious about assisting the afflicted countries in battling the terrorist threat and do so effectively. When France came in initially in 2013, it had some success, but then it morphed into this Operation Barkhane, which was seen by many Malians, and I think they were quite right in doing that. It was seen as some kind of an occupation force. The French were not very, very good at communicating what it was that they were doing. And, there are now a few informal contacts going on. There have been Americans visiting Bamako recently. Even the Ivorian Minister for African Integration went to Ouagadougou very recently to talk with representatives from the Traoré government and see what they could jointly do, although there is a great deal of mistrust between the two. But on the whole, there are two aspects here. The first aspect is, if you want to have international assistance and the international community has to get serious about this, let's not mince words about this, but the other side of the equation is that you need to have a plan. You need to have an idea, how are we going to fight this? How are we going to fight terrorism in an effective way? And just throwing military hardware and soldiers at the problem is never going to solve it, because, as Adib rightly points out, it negates the root causes of this problem, which is marginalization, a lack of economic prospects for the populations, especially in marginalized areas away from the capital cities. And that is where the root of the issue lies.
Finally, before I let the both of you go on this particular discussion, Adib, do you sense that this joint military force is a way for the three juntas to consolidate power? Because there was a promise to tackle the security issues, before they took over, and that has not happened, or maybe that has proven difficult.
Well, surely, I think it is more political than strategic, aimed at countering the threats of terrorism in those countries, and of course, addressing the various insecurity issues they face. In my opinion, I think it is a way of getting their populations to understand that something is being done when not much is being done. Secondly, it's also a statement to ECOWAS, basically saying we can do it on our own. You know, we don't need you. And I must say that is also not so pleasant a news to know, because there's been effort, like I said earlier on, in getting these countries back on track and in getting them very much being part and parcel of any security arrangements that we have within the sub-regional body aimed at addressing our insecurity issue. So I must say it has further complicated matters, but there is still a window of opportunity. I've always contended that we don't need to ostracize them. I mean, we don't need to see them as prodigal sons and let them off the hook. No, we need to engage. There's still a window of diplomacy that we need to explore to get these countries to understand that they cannot do it alone. We cannot do it alone, yet hence the need for us to come together to address our common insecurity challenges.
Right. Final words from you, Brown.
Well, I think the main issue here is also, which I alluded to previously already, is that we need to start getting honest about what the problem is, and we need to start getting honest about what our approaches are like. You know, we've got 3 juntas in the Sahel that have to pretend they're winning the war, whereas everybody knows they're losing the war. That's number one. They're assisted by a country, Russia, that pretends it's helping them, whereas we all know that not only does Russia have its own problems in the Ukraine, which is 100% responsible for, but it is also using the juntas in the Sahel as pretty cheap pawns in their destabilization plans, one part of which we saw recently in Benin. So we have to be able to remove all this rhetorical fog that is surrounding these anti-terrorist efforts and finding out what we're actually dealing with and what we're honestly doing to make the situation better. We're not there yet. We're far away from that situation. And until the rhetoric and until the discussion about what the terrorism problem actually entails and how we deal with it, we will not make a great deal of progress going forward, I'm afraid.
Awesome. Thank you both. You heard the Brown Posthumous, DW correspondent in the Sahel region. You also heard regional security analyst and the executive director for the Jatike Center for Human Security and Peace Building, Adib Sani. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
A joint military force has a potential to reshape the Sahel's fight against extremism, but its success will hinge on more than military might alone. Building trust among member states, ensuring transparent leadership, and fostering genuine cooperation will be essential. The path forward will be challenging. True and lasting stability requires more than just joint operations. It demands meaningful engagement with local communities and a commitment to addressing the root causes of the conflict: poverty, limited opportunities, and weak institutions. The eyes of the world are on the Sahel, and for millions who live there, the outcome of this alliance will shape their future. So share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa, listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This episode was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe. I am Ajua Tinkrama Domina. Many thanks for listening.